Okay, so Pete Rose, huh? You really want to dig into this guy. And let me tell you, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, we're talking about a guy who practically defines baseball, but then there's that other side, the fall from grace, that kind of thing.
You know, it's funny when you really look at Rose, it's not just about what he did on the field. It's like that same intensity, that drive might have been what tripped him up later on. It's like he couldn't just turn it off, you know?
And you're totally right. We've got a mountain of stuff you sent us about him, articles, old game footage, even some opinion pieces. So obviously you want the whole picture, the good, the bad, the ugly, the whole shebang. So where do we even start with a guy like Pete Rose? I mean, this wasn't some kid who had it handed to him, right?
Not at all. Rose was born and raised in Cincinnati, blue-collar family, baseball was everything. His dad, Harry, played semi-pro, and basically, Rose was practically born with a bat in his hands. He even taught him how to switch hit when he was just a kid.
Talk about a dad who knows what he's doing. I bet young Pete didn't realize how important that would be. It's like his dad kind of set him up to be a switch-hitting powerhouse right from the start.
It's amazing, right? You see that a lot with athletes, though, right? That early influence can be huge. It's not just talent. It's someone pushing you, showing you what's possible. It's like nature and nurture working together.
And, I mean, talk about work ethic, right?
Yeah.
Charlie Hustle, that wasn't just some made-up nickname, was it? This guy was like the definition of hustle on the field.
No kidding. Every game, every at-bat, Rose played with this intensity. You can almost feel it in the stands. Even on walks, regular walks, he was sprinting down to first like it was the World Series.
Speaking of, do you know that story about Whitey Ford? There was spring training, and Rose, like, books it to first on a walk, and Ford, being the sarcastic guy he was, yells out, "Charlie Hustle," for the first time. Even way back then, everyone could see Rose had this fire in him.
It was like he was saying, this is how I play. I'm giving it everything I've got. It definitely rubbed some people the wrong way, but the fans, they loved it.
And it definitely showed in the stats. Now, for anyone listening who maybe doesn't know every baseball record ever, give us the quick rundown. What puts Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame conversation, just on a numbers level? Okay, so we're talking 17-time All-Star, 3 World Series rings, an MVP title. I mean, this guy played more games than anyone in baseball history. Talk about stamina. But the number that really makes people's jaws drop is 4,256.
Hold on. 4,256 hits. That's crazy. Most guys are lucky to get a third of that their whole careers.
It's a record that's still standing, and for good reason. That takes insane talent, sure, but also consistency, like year after year after year. Rose wasn't some fluke. He was a hitting machine for decades.
And it's like he knew it, too. Remember that quote? The grass is going to get green, the weather is going to get hot, Pete Rose is going to get 200 hits, and bat .300. The guy practically called it. It's that confidence, right? That unshakable belief. But I think it's more than that. It's like he understood the game on a different level. He wasn't just trying to hit home runs. He was wearing down pitchers, getting on base, doing whatever it took to win.
And when he broke Ty Cobb's record, man, even watching it on TV, you could feel the energy. That was more than just a game. It was history.
September 8th, 1985. Rose is playing for his hometown team, the Reds. His mom and his son are in the stands. President Reagan even called him. The whole baseball world was watching.
And then, boom, that hit single to left field, and the crowd goes wild. You could see it on Rose's face. All that weight, all those years, it all led up to that moment.
And this is important. This was before the scandals, before everything went south. In that moment, he was a hero, a legend who did what most people thought was impossible. Fans, other players, even his rivals, they all had this respect for him. It was a celebration of an incredible athlete at the top of his game.
But like we said, nothing lasts forever.
Yeah.
And the story of Pete Rose, well, it's about more than just the wins. It's about how fast things can change, how even the biggest stars can stumble.
And for Rose, those stumbles, they were tied directly to the game he loved. Because while he was out there racking up hits, something else was going on behind the scenes, something that would change everything.
Yeah, it's like a Greek tragedy almost.
Yeah.
You've got Pete Rose right at the top of his game, living the dream. But then behind it all, there's this whole other thing going on that would end up overshadowing it all. Yeah. You're talking about the gambling, right? And I get it. For a lot of people, it might seem weird. Like, why would they ban someone for life over that? So explain it to me like I'm turd. I don't know. Like, I've never even seen a baseball game before. What made what Rose did so bad?
Well, for one thing, it wasn't just betting on baseball in general. It was the fact that he was betting on games that his team was playing in as the manager, the guy calling the shots. That's a huge conflict of interest, and it makes people wonder if he's making decisions based on, what's best for the team or what's best for his bets.
So it's not just like breaking some rule. It's more about the whole...
The idea of the game, right? Yeah, the integrity of the game. It's like, why do people even watch sports? Because it's supposed to be a fair competition, right? And when you have someone like a manager betting on the games, it casts a shadow over everything. Remember the Black Sox scandal?
Vaguely, I think it was.
Yeah.
Something about players throwing the World Series.
Exactly. 1919, 8 players from the Chicago White Sox, they conspired to intentionally lose the World Series because gamblers paid them off, and it almost ruined baseball. I mean, people were devastated. They felt like they couldn't trust the game anymore.
Wow, I had no idea it was that big of a deal.
Oh, it was huge. And ever since then, baseball has had a zero-tolerance policy on betting, especially from people inside the game, like players, managers, coaches, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. You got to protect the game, right? So when did all this come out about Rose? When did people start to suspect something was up?
Things really started heating up in 1989 when Bart Giamatti, who was the commissioner of baseball at the time, launched an investigation into Rose's gambling.
We're not talking about, like, a friendly office pool here, right? This was serious business.
Oh, yeah. There were allegations that he was betting on hundreds of games, and not just on wins or losses, but on all sorts of things, like how many runs would be scored in an inning, even the performance of specific players.
See, that's what I don't get. If you're already a successful manager, why risk it all like that? It just seems so reckless.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was it a thrill? An addiction? Did he think he was smarter than everyone else? It's hard to say. But at first, Rose, he denied everything. Completely denied it.
He couldn't keep that up forever, though, could he?
No, he couldn't. As the investigation went on, more and more evidence came out. Betting slips with his handwriting, people who said they placed bets for him. It was just a mountain of evidence. And finally, in 1989, he was banned from baseball for life.
And that was it. Game over for Charlie Hustle.
Pretty much.
Gee.
He was out, banned for life. And that's what makes his story so tragic, so Shakespearean. He's a hero, a legend, and then because of his own actions, he became something else entirely. A cautionary tale.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. But it doesn't end there, does it? I mean, the gambling scandal was huge, but there were other things too, weren't there?
You're right. Unfortunately, Rose's story doesn't end there. There are other incidents, other shadows that followed him.
So it's almost like we're talking about multiple different versions of Pete Rose, right? The player, the manager, the guy involved in all these other things. It's tough to keep it all straight.
Yeah, it's complicated, that's for sure. But let's talk about some of those other things. You mentioned tax evasion.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he got in trouble for that too, didn't he?
He did. In 1990, not long after the baseball ban, he pled guilty to not paying taxes on income from selling autographs and some other stuff. He actually ended up spending some time in prison for that.
Man, what a fall from grace. It's almost hard to believe, going from baseball legend to, a convicted criminal.
It's a wild turn of events, no doubt. And then there's the allegation from 2017.
Right, the statutory rape allegation.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, for everyone listening, we're not here to relitigate that or anything, but it's part of the story, isn't it? You can't really talk about Pete Rose without mentioning it.
You're right, it's part of the story. So basically, a woman came forward and said that she and Rose had a sexual relationship back in the 70s and that she was underage at the time.
And Rose, I mean, what did he say about all that?
Well, he admitted to having a relationship with her, but he said that she was of legal age at the time. It never actually went to court or anything, but it definitely added another layer to his already complicated public image.
It's heavy stuff. And it makes you wonder, like, how do we reconcile all these different sides of someone? The good, the bad, the really bad.
Exactly. How do you separate the person from their actions? Especially with someone like Rose, where those actions have such lasting consequences. It's something people are still debating, even today, after his death.
It's like you almost want to root for the guy, right? The hometown hero who made good. But then you learn about all this other stuff, and it's like, man, it's tough.
It is tough. It's messy. And it reminds us that even our heroes, they're human, they're flawed, they make mistakes, sometimes huge ones.
It makes you think about legacy, Like, how do you want to be remembered? And is it even possible to control that?
That's the question, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, all we have are these stories, these moments in time. And how we interpret them, how we choose to remember them, well, that's up to us.
I guess that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Yeah.
And frustrating. And kind of sad, too.
It's all of that. But hey, that's why we do what we do, right? Trying to make sense of it all.
Digging deep, exploring the good, the bad, and everything in between. And on that note, I think we've given everyone plenty to think about. What do you say? Ready to wrap this one up?
Sounds good to me.